27. 26 knots down the angle. 106 interval is a rhino at 5. Sure, sir. 207 on flat path on course 1 mile. Sure, sir. 207 on flat path on.
On the 4th of May 2010, the Liberian-flagged Russian-operated tanker, the MV Moscow University, departed Sudan for China, carrying a cargo of 86,000 tons of oil and a crew of 23. Sailing through the Gulf of Aden, the tanker entered the Arabian Sea on the 5th of May, where at 0800 the ship's captain, Yuri Tolchinsky, received a report that 3 small boats carrying 11 men were fast approaching the tanker. Looking out to sea, Captain Tolchinsky realised they were pirates and immediately alerted his crew to the situation and began steering the vessel away in a bid to evade the hijackers. Closing up to the ship, the pirates fired an RPG round at the bridge of the Moscow University, whose crew members manned the onboard water cannons and fired off flares in an effort to fight off the pirates, who responded with small arms fire from their AK-47s. The ship's crew successfully fought off several boarding attempts by the pirates for approximately an hour, but over time the vessel began to lose speed as a result of its evasive manoeuvres. Realising this and knowing that his ship was going to be boarded, Captain Tolchinsky sent out a distress signal to nearby friendly warships and aircraft before ordering his crew to cut the ship's engines and barricade themselves into the below-deck steering compartment. At the same time, the pirates threw up their hooks and ladders and began boarding the tanker. Within 15 minutes they had complete control over the vessel. Several kilometres away, an Orion AP-3C maritime patrol aircraft of the Royal Australian Air Force picked up the tanker's SOS signal and immediately headed to the scene, where its crew made contact with Captain Tolchinsky, who, using a radio he had brought down with him into the compartment, briefed the Australians on the situation. The Australian air crew then relayed this information to the Marshal Shaposhnikov, a Russian Navy destroyer which, at the time, was operating just south of the Yemeni island of Socotra. Altering her course, the Shaposhnikov sailed east to come to the assistance of the Russian tanker. However, until she arrived, the 23-man crew of the Moscow University had to stay put, as the pirates began to search the vessel for them with the intention of taking them hostage. After several hours of searching, the pirates found the crew inside the steering compartment and tried multiple times to force open the steel door that led into the room, each attempt proving unsuccessful. Becoming increasingly frustrated, a couple of the pirates poked the barrels of their AK-47s through small holes through which you could see into the compartment, and began sporadically firing and shouting for the crew to surrender. Eventually, the pirates gave up trying to force their way inside and instead began looting the vessel, which had by this time come to a complete stop in the middle of the Arabian Sea, some 640 kilometres away from the nearest coastline. Meanwhile, the Marshal Shaposhnikov sailed throughout the 5th of May towards the tanker's location, and as she got closer, one of her onboard Ka-27 helicopters in the early morning hours of the 6th of May was dispatched to make contact with the Moscow University. Reaching its position, the helicopter circled the vessel several times for reconnaissance purposes, before being spotted and fired upon by the pirates. Not long after, at 0300 on the 6th, the Russian destroyer arrived and immediately fired several warning shots across the front of the tanker with her onboard 30mm Gatling guns and her 100mm main cannons. In response, the pirates sent radio messages to the Russian destroyer claiming that they were not afraid and had taken multiple hostages. After confirming with Captain Tolchinsky that he and his crew were all safe in the steering compartment and that no hostages had in fact been taken, the captain of the Shaposhnikov ordered for several more rounds to be fired at the tanker, whilst a detachment of Marines from the Naval Infantry were ordered to conduct an immediate boarding operation. At 0400 on the 6th of May 2010, between 20 and 25 Russian Marines loaded up onto 3 speedboats and headed off towards the hijacked tanker, whilst the Ka-27 helicopter provided aerial surveillance and the Marshal Shaposhnikov laid down suppressive fire. Approaching the MV Moscow University, the 3 speedboats docked up on the starboard side of the ship, enabling the Marines to commence their boarding. Scaling up the ship's side, the first Marines assembled on the ship's deck and secured the immediate vicinity, when suddenly they came on a small arms fire from the pirates, some of whom were positioned inside the vessel's bridge. Seeking whatever cover they could find, the Marines returned fire and became involved in a short but fierce firefight that concluded after several minutes when calls for surrender were heard from the hijackers, who had suffered 1 killed and 3 wounded during the brief engagement. Handing themselves over to the Russians, the remaining 10 pirates were forced to lie down with their hands tied behind their backs at the forward section of the tanker, while some of the Marines moved forward and seized their equipment, which included 1 RPG, at least 7 AK-47s, their navigational equipment, hooks, ladders and bottles of fuel for their boats. Additionally, with the ship back in friendly hands and all hostile personnel accounted for, the 23 crew members were freed from the steering compartment, having been in there for nearly 20 hours. Meanwhile, back on board the Marshal Shaposhnikov, discussions were underway between the senior Russian commanders on the scene and officials in Moscow as to what was going to happen to the 10 pirates that had been captured, whose nationality wasn't known. Initially, the Russian Foreign Ministry stated that all 10 would be sent to Russia to go on trial. However, this was reversed, with an official from the Russian Defense Ministry stating, "In the absence of legal agreements, it was impossible to bring these pirates to justice. A decision was adopted to set them free aboard one of the small vessels they themselves had used to attack the Moscow University tanker." This statement was echoed by another official who said, "Legal rules for the prosecution of pirates operating in Somalia did not exist, and thus they, the pirates, do not fall under the jurisdiction of any state and international law." Consequently, the Russian Marines rounded up the pirates, loaded them onto one of their small boats, provided them with food, water and a tank of fuel, and released them 640 kilometers out at sea. However, approximately an hour after being released, the radio signals being transmitted from the boat disappeared from the radar screens on board the Shaposhnikov, and the 10 pirates, along with their boat, were never seen again.